Hello and welcome back to the channel. I forgot to mention in my last video that I was 37 days into my cycle when I reached Edinburgh, and I'd done about 600 miles. Obviously I didn't cycle straight from London to Edinburgh, I went all over the place, so that's why I got to 600 miles. I also forgot to mention that I met quite a few different people when I was cycling. Quite a few different European cyclists who come to England for just a cycle tour. And the other thing was that I quickly found that hostels were just as good as, if not better than, campsites, because don't have to put the tent up, and the communal areas made it easier to talk to different people. Obviously, when you're in a tent, you're on your own, you shut it up. Even if you're surrounded by other people, you don't interact with them the same. So the hostels were great for that. Now, as I said in my last video, I realised I was carrying too much weight, so I shed a lot of it, including food. I soon found that food's quite heavy. I mean, I bought some pre-packed special camping food, which was still in the bottom of one of my panniers. I never touched them. One of the things I really got used to having, it was might be a strange thing, but it was cuppa soup, easy to make. And then what I'd do is get a can of tuna, open the can of tuna and stick it in with the soup, make it into like a thicker broth. And I tried sardines, didn't really work. Mackerel was the big one for me. I found mackerel was lovely. You get mackerel in little tins with in tomato sauce and stuff. Stick it into with the soup. Plenty of nutrients, ideal for cycling. And then porridge was another great thing. I didn't weigh too much. Milk was always a bit of an issue. Couldn't really carry a bottle of milk. And sugar, another heavy thing. But I managed to pick up little sachets of sugar in different places, and little milk pots. And so going forward, I decided that I wouldn't be carrying that much food and buy food as I was moving along. So I stayed in Edinburgh for 4 days in total. It was a great campsite with lots of facilities, great showers, the stable bar and restaurant, that was really nice. The second day I was there, a big group of mini enthusiasts turned up from Germany. And I met 2 Italians who were also on a cycle tour while I was there. As I say, when you've got a communal area where you can interact with other people, it's a lot better. Anyway, I've got my new tent. I sent the old one back to my brother. I picked up my bike from the having a service, and then it was time to set off again. Now, the big way out of Edinburgh was over a bridge, which was a bit hairy going over. It was quite windy, but I got to the other side and I started following the coast again. I took a different route from what normal people would have just done if they were going to John O'Groats. And I found this cycle track which was taking me around the coast, and I found a really old chapel, if you like, where abbots used to live, like 500 years old. That was quite interesting. And then I was surprised by a beach. Not something you really think about in Scotland, but I mean, this was nice weather. I turned up there, all the people on the beach and swimming. It was a lovely sunny day, sandy beach. Yeah, interesting place. My next goal was trying to get to St Andrews. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but St Andrews is the home of golf in Scotland. Unfortunately, there were no campsites there, so I was back into a hostel. I managed to find a hostel right in the centre of St Andrews. Booked in. They had a dedicated bike store, so I could lock up the bike. After unpacking a little bit and a shower, I decided to have a look around St Andrews. And when I said it's the home of golf, it really is, because every second shop was a golf shop or a golf related shop, and it's obviously an area with a lot of money as well, because the buildings were really big, lots of posh cars. Went to look for somewhere where the locals might go for a drink. Went to a good couple of different pubs. I found Americans and Japanese, and they're all chatting about golf, of course. And then I found a locals pub, if you like. And when I went in there, and they were talking about golf, I soon found out that it was full of caddies who worked on the course, and they were all dissing the golfers that I had to take around. I took some shots of the golf course. It just come in quite misty, so pictures weren't fantastic. Well, I stayed a day overnight there, and then my next big stop was Montrose, and I found a nice campsite there, and stayed just one night, and then I was back on the road again, and I went to a place called Stonehaven. I met a couple of guys out on their trikes, motorbike trikes, which were quite strange because they had two wheels at the front and one at the back, and they suggested going to Stonehaven because that's where they were from. And I went to Stonehaven. I found the campsite, and it was really busy, but I managed to squeeze in between some other tents, and went out, had a shower, found a pub, had a few drinks, chatting to the Scottish guys who were in there. That was a one-night stay. Now, when I've been looking at the way on the map, I was looking at going to Aberdeen, and quite a few the Scottish people said, "Oh, don't go to Aberdeen. It's a rough place. It's run down and everything else." But it was on my way, so I decided to disregard what they said, and I followed the path, the route around the coast. My first sight of Aberdeen, I was thinking maybe the Scottish people were right. It looked a bit run down, but then I realised it was all the dock area, so it was quite industrialised. But when I cycled into Aberdeen, I found it was just like most big towns, shopping areas, everything else. Now, there was a campsite outside of Aberdeen, but it didn't look very nice. And when I checked online, I found a hostel, which was in Aberdeen. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the address. So I ended up cycling up and down in Aberdeen trying to find it, and managed to speak to a road sweeper who pointed me in the right direction. I think I got there about 5 o'clock, and luckily they had the last room. Again, nice dedicated storage for the bike. So I unpacked, shower again. Always nice to have a shower after the end of a cycling day. And I was going to head back into Aberdeen to find somewhere to eat, somewhere for a drink. And the guy in the hostel suggested I go across the road to a hotel which had an open bar. I mean, it was a glorious sunny evening, and that seemed like a good idea, you know, just across the road. So I went in there, had a couple of drinks, got chatting to a guy there, and apparently a lot of the oil rig workers stayed in this hotel in between their on-off shifts, if you like, and I got talking to a guy called Paul, and he was waiting to fly back out on the helicopter to do his next shift. 3 weeks on and 3 weeks off. And he was saying he'd actually moved his family out to Thailand. Bought a house over there, got a car, put his kids into school, and he was going to commute. So on his 3 weeks off, he was going to commute to Thailand. And I thought that was a bit of a long way to go. But he's saying, yeah, what he was getting for his money out of there was so much better than England, and his family liked it. I spent quite a few hours chatting to him. It's an interesting thing. He was an electrician, but as I say, he was working on the rigs, earning some decent money on the rigs apparently. I mean, 3 weeks to work, can't really spend anything on the rig, so you can understand they make some decent money. While I was in there, in the hostel, I decided to join the International Hostel Association. I mean, I paid £10 to join, and then straight away it gave me £5 off the cost of the hostel. And given that I'm started using hostels quite often now, it seemed like a good investment. Within a couple of stays, I'm going to get my money back. So, and then, as I said previously, great to communicate with other people who are in the hostels. There was two German guys in the hostel, and they were hiking around Scotland, big rucksacks on their back, but they were going from hostel to hostel, and that's how they set out their journey. It's an interesting thing to do, but carrying all the weight, not for me. On the bike it's not so bad, but carrying it on your back is a bit strenuous, I would have thought. So I've left. I only stayed one night, and next day was a beautiful day again, and I set off to a place called Elgin. And just before Elgin, there was another campsite I could have gone on, but it was too early in the day to stop, so I decided to carry on, hoping that when I got to Elgin they'd find a campsite. Unfortunately, I didn't, and no hostels. So I ended up staying in a bed and breakfast. Wasn't too expensive, obviously more expensive than a campsite and more expensive than the hostel, but it was a nice hostel, nice bedroom, bed, nice and comfy, nice showers, and breakfast in the morning, which is great. Now, when I left Elgin the next day, it was the weather wasn't very good. It was off. It wasn't raining when I first set off, but about half an hour in, the heavens opened. It's the first time I really got really wet, and I was trying to find shade somewhere. I ended up staying in a little copse in the middle of some trees, waited for half an hour to see if it would slow down. It wasn't going to get any easier. Weather looked like it was in for the rest of the day, so I persevered and carried on. Eventually I got to Inverness, I wasn't going to go to a campsite. Everything was soaked. And I found a hostel in Inverness. Again, lucky. I found a bed. And this was my first time I've done a hostel with bunk beds. And as I got the last bunk, and it was a upper bunk. And there was a Polish guy in there on the bottom bunk, and then I think there was 2 French guys and another 2 German guys. Quite a lot of German people visiting England, and so that was 6 of us in a bunk room. But I was glad to be there because everything was soaked, and I booked in for a couple of days. I thought I'd get everything washed, get everything dried out, get ready for my next part of the trip. Now, another place I really wanted to visit while I was in Scotland was Loch Ness. So that was the goal from Inverness. Now, Inverness to Loch Ness, I found that there's 2 routes which went to St August, and I could follow the General Wades Road, or I could find the other side of the loch with a bit more of a rough mountain biking trail. So after 2 days of Inverness, everything's dried, everything's washed, I'm restocked with food. I set off to Loch Ness. Now, my original idea was to see if I could find somewhere to wild camp on the shore of the loch, but as I got closer and closer, I realised that there wasn't much of a shore. I mean, I found a couple of spots, and I'd gone down to the water's edge, but there was nowhere to actually put up a tent. So I was deciding if to carry on to St Augustus when the weather started changing again. The rain was coming back. And I remembered seeing on one of the maps I had that there was supposed to be a campsite on Loch Ness. So a couple of miles further down I found it. It was the Loch Ness camping and caravan site. And this was down quite a steep hill down to the side of the loch. Luckily, the camp warden, I think her name was Mary, she allowed me to put my tent up earlier because apparently you couldn't actually pitch until after 3, and it was 2 o'clock by then, but the rain was coming. And so I managed to pitch up just before the rain broke. I was inside my tent, trying to keep everything dry. I popped off to have a quick shower, and they had a little lounge area there as well, and TVs and books and things to do, tea and coffee machine, which was free, which was good. And when I looked out the window, it was throwing it down. And so I spent a good couple of hours in there looking through the books, looking at some maps for my next bits of travel. And went to bed about 10. Didn't sleep very well because the rain was quite heavy on the tent. The first time it was really, really heavy, noisy. Even with cotton wool in my ears, it was still noisy. I woke up in the morning. It looked quite bright, but I looked at the weather forecast and it looked like it was going to be back with rain within a couple of hours. So I decided to book another night. But while it was fine, I went off to have a look at Loch Ness. It's quite eerie. There was mist all over the loch. I didn't see any sign of Nessie. did quite a few things on the side of the shore though. I found an old, like a wooden cabin on wheels. It looked like it was from the, I don't know, the 18th century. It looked like it'd been there for a long time. Maybe a fisherman's hut of some sort. And sod's law, it brightened up. Typical, you can't never tell with the weather in Scotland. I spoke to Mary and she said, well, you're not that far from Foyers Falls, which is apparently another big sightseeing location. It's only a few miles away, but the track, the walking track up through the hill to find it was quite treacherous in places because of the recent rain and muddy. And I got to the top and there was a cafe up there, and I had a really late breakfast. I think it was probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but the sun was out and I was looking over the loch and looking over the falls. An interesting place. So after that, I scrambled my way back down to the campsite. Started to prepare myself for the next day, and the next day was going to be a cycle back into Inverness, because I'd come back on myself going to Loch Ness, so I needed to go back to Inverness in order to cross over into the next part of Scotland. And the next part of Scotland was going to be so I made some notes just so that I could see where I was, you know, remembering certain places. So I went back into Inverness the next day. It was fine. And I crossed over the Keswick Bridge into the Black Isles. That's what it's called, Black Isles. Again, this is another route which a lot of the Lejog cyclists take, but I was detouring off it again. And I went through to a place called Dingle, stayed overnight in Dingle. That was a campsite. After Dingle, struggled on. There's quite a few hills there. The scenery was different in different places, and I went through a patch of woodland where all the trees had been felled at either side of the road. It looked like it was devastated. It didn't look like they'd replanted anything. But apparently, you know, Scotland supplies a lot of the wood across the UK. Well, my next stop, should I say, was in Embo, and this was like a holiday resort type campsite. It had like a leisure centre in it and all that. But I ended up putting my tent up near some like dunes. It was quite noisy as well because it was near the road. I mean, it calmed down a bit later in the evening. But this was the most expensive campsite I'd stayed on. It was like £27 a night. I guess because you were paying for the leisure centre type thing. Oh, they've got a sauna and a swimming pool. I'll give it a go. Unfortunately, by the time I got there, it was closing. So £27 was just for the night for the pitch. So after there, my next major stop was in Hemsdale. Now, to get to Hemsdale, I ended up going on quite a few busy roads. The cycle routes are good, but they seem to take you miles and miles out of where you want to go to. So I tried the main roads. It was difficult in parts, There was a few times I got off the bike up a hill when there was a turning at the top, just get off and push round the corner, just make sure there's no traffic coming the other way. I went up one hill and there was a truck behind me, and I'd gone round the corner, there was a truck coming down the other side. I could have got squashed in between them. That would have been the end of me. So going on the roads, a bit more dangerous, but quicker. Anyway, I got to Helmsdale, no campsite, but there was a hostel. It was in a converted church. I got a bit wet again, so luckily there was some drying room in the hostel. Went out, got some food from the local shop. When I came back, there was a couple of guys in the hostel who were doing the Land's End to John O'Groats. Well, the old guy was 87, and they were 9 days into their cycle, and the other guy was his son. I think he was probably about 50-ish, and I was like, yeah, respect. 87 years old, 9 days, and they were nearly there. So after a nice night, I'm off to my final bit of this destination. Day 57, I get to John O'Groats. Now, I've never been there before. I've read about it quite a lot. Always fancied doing the little jog myself. Never got around to doing it. Not a great deal there. I had the obligatory picture taken underneath the sign. Had a couple of other guys take the photo for me. Now this is where people normally stop. They've done the one end to end. Now I've been reading about the Orkneys. Now I'm not really a great fan of archaeology, but what I'd seen on the Orkneys was interesting, even to me. So I decided to book a ferry for the next day to go over to the Orkneys. Ferry was about 9:30 in the morning. Weather wasn't so good during the night. Looked like it was going to be raining all night again. Get up in the morning, it's clear. I've always slept, so I'm in a rush to get everything packed away. And this was the first time I really got attacked by the midges, and they were bad. I'd never experienced anything like it. Managed to get everything packed away, rushed down to where the ferry was, and missed it. Couldn't believe it. I was like 10 minutes late. I've turned around and I'm looking at Forrest Gump. Guy with a beard. Yeah. Hat on, just like Forrest Gump. Anyway, I got chatting to him, and his name was Sean Conway, and he was doing a triathlon of England. So he'd already swum the length of England. He'd already cycled the length of England, and now he's doing the run from John O'Groats back to Land's End. What a character. Unsupported. Not even sure if he was doing it for charity or not, or he was just doing it. But again, respect. But as I say, just looked like Forrest Gump. Anyway, so I missed the ferry. My ticket went, ticket office, oh yeah, that's no problem, you can change it for the next ferry. So I waited around. An hour later, the ferry's back. and then it's me on the choppy water going to the Orkneys. And I think I'll stop that there. We're on 30 minutes. I don't want to be overdoing it again. So when we pick up, this is going to be, this is chapter 4 part 2, and when we come back we'll be on chapter 4 part 3, and that's the Orkneys. Thanks for watching. Love to hear your comments, and we'll see you all soon.